I have 41 minutes of battery left, and I'm recording this because I don't think I'm getting off Corbin Island the way I came. My name doesn't matter right now. What matters is that I'm a journalist, and 8 months ago I started tracking a pattern that shouldn't exist. 11 people, unconnected, from different states, different income brackets, different lives. All of them took a private ferry to a research island off the coast of Maine, and all 11 stopped existing in any searchable database within a year of arriving. Not dead, nothing that clean, just gone. No obituaries, no forwarding addresses, no last social media post, no bank activity, nothing. It was like someone had taken an eraser to 11 separate lives and pressed hard enough to tear the page underneath. I found the first name by accident. A missing persons report filed by a sister in Bangor, closed within a week, marked subject located, case unfounded. I called the number listed for the subject. A woman answered who was not the missing woman, spoke in the missing woman's exact cadence, and hung up on me the second I asked about the island. I told my editor it was probably a cult, or a scam, or some tax shelter for rich eccentrics who like their privacy. She told me to get pictures and get out clean. I got the pictures. I'm still working on the second part. The island calls itself a private wellness retreat. The brochure has soft lighting and a woman meditating on a dock at sunrise, the kind of image built to make you stop scrolling. What it actually is, I found in a filing cabinet inside an unlocked maintenance shed on my second night here, is a data laundering operation running under the name of a company that specializes in identity remediation. A clean, clinical phrase for erasing people who pay to disappear. Debtors drowning in judgments they'll never outrun. Witnesses who don't trust the government's version of protection. Men running from custody battles they've already lost in court. Women running from husbands with money, lawyers, and a talent for finding people who don't want to be found. For a fee that starts at $200,000, you come to this island, and over the next 6 months, a team of specialists systematically dismantles your digital and legal existence and constructs a new one from the ground up. New credit history, built slowly enough to look organic. New employment records, cross-reference with companies that don't ask questions. A whole invented childhood, complete with yearbook photos generated by software I didn't recognize and couldn't reverse engineer. Then you leave the island as someone else entirely, and the person you used to be simply stops appearing anywhere. I thought that was the story. I thought I had it. I was wrong about one important thing. Not everyone here consents. In a garden shed behind the East Dormitory that seemed to function as an unofficial storage closet, a woman named Renata, 63 years old, whose brother had paid to have her remediated in the middle of a contested inheritance. She'd been declared legally incompetent by a doctor who it turned out was on the island's payroll. She'd been here 14 months. She wasn't restrained. She didn't need to be. They don't kill anyone, she told me, her voice flat with the particular calm of a person who stopped being afraid once she realized fear stopped changing anything. That's the trick of it. Killing leaves a body, and a body starts questions. This is cleaner. You just become unfindable. Who investigates a missing person who isn't technically missing because there's a woman in Ohio right now with my social security number, voting in my name, using my face on a driver's license? I asked her how that was even possible. A different face wearing the same identity. They don't need her face to match my old photos, Renata said, and she almost smiled. They only need it to match the new ones, and everyone who could compare the two is already gone. I have a name now. The director who runs the operation is a former state records administrator who realized correctly that in a country of 330 million people, nobody is actually checking whether the fourth Jane Miller registered in Ohio this year is the same Jane Miller from 5 years ago. Nobody has the time or the budget. The system trusts its own paperwork more than it trusts the truth standing in front of it. I don't know if this recording survives me getting off this island. I don't know if I survive it. But if you're watching this, instead of reading a byline with my name attached to it, that means it didn't work. That means I'm the 12th person this place erased, filed somewhere under a name I never chose. Check the ferry logs while they still exist. Somewhere in a database that hasn't been scrubbed yet, my name is still there. The invitation came in a black envelope with no return address, and the only sentence inside read, "You have been selected to experience something real." I should have thrown it away right there in the lobby of my building. Instead, I read it 4 more times and got on a boat 2 weeks later. I'm not proud of why I went. I'd been chasing a story about extreme experience tourism for months. Rich people paying obscene amounts of money for immersive terror events, staged abductions, actors who never break character, the whole underground industry of manufactured fear. A producer friend said if I did it myself and wrote about it from the inside, she'd pay triple my usual rate. Easy money, I told myself. A haunted house with a bigger budget and better catering. They took my phone at the dock before I even saw the island properly. Standard procedure, they said, for immersion integrity. I signed a waiver that ran 40 pages, and I did not read it carefully, because I was 31 years old and convinced nothing could actually hurt me if I was the one writing about it afterward. The island had no name on any map I could find later, no matter how hard I looked. What it had was 12 guest cabins arranged around a gravel courtyard, a windowless concrete building the staff called the theater, and about 30 other guests who had all received the exact same black envelope, all of them a little too well dressed for an island with no cell service. We were told over an unnervingly elegant dinner that over the next 4 days, each of us would undergo a personalized psychological encounter, designed by behavioral specialists specifically for our individual fears. A woman named Adrienne, who ran the place with the calm of someone who had done this 100 times before, told us our fear responses were, in her words, the entire point of the exhibit. I laughed at that. I was the only one who did. My encounter started on the second night. I woke to my cabin door standing wide open and every one of my belongings gone, replaced item for item with someone else's clothes, someone else's toothbrush, someone else's passport carrying my photograph under a stranger's name. A note taped to the mirror read, "You were never here." For 9 straight hours I searched an island full of people who all claimed not to recognize me, guests and staff performing the same bewilderment so convincingly that by hour 6 I'd started doubting which one of us was actually lying. It was Marcus, another guest who finally broke and told me the truth 2 days later, crouched behind the boathouse with his hands shaking hard enough that his coffee kept spilling over the cup's edge. He'd found the control room by accident, during a shift change when a service door had been left unlocked. "It's a viewing gallery," he said, not looking at me, looking at the water instead. One-way glass, whole wall of it. There were people up there, watching us, drinking wine like it was a play. The island wasn't a haunted attraction at all. It was a live auction house for real fear. Wealthy clients, the kind who had already purchased every physical luxury available to a human being, paid enormous sums to watch ordinary people undergo genuine, unscripted psychological breakdowns, filmed and streamed to a private subscriber base that paid 7 figures a year for the privilege of access. Every actor on staff was actually a psychologist. Every clause in that 40-page waiver about immersion integrity was really informed consent, buried deliberately in dense legal language, agreeing to be studied and terrorized for someone else's entertainment. On the final night, they gathered all 30 of us into the theater, and the lights came up along the far wall, which turned out, all along, to be one-way glass. 40 faces looked back at us out of the dark, holding wine glasses, watching us understand, in real time, exactly what we'd been for 4 days. Adrienne stepped forward with a microphone, wearing a smile that had never once, across 4 days, reached her eyes. "Congratulations," she said. "You just gave the performance of your lives. Ratings were excellent this season. They let us go the next morning because legally they had to. The waiver was airtight, every scare vetted in advance by lawyers, every scream monetized within the strict letter of the law. I went home. I collected my triple pay. I never wrote the article because 2 weeks later a courier delivered another black envelope to my apartment door, and inside was a single photograph. Me, asleep in my own bed, taken from an angle no window in my apartment could possibly explain. I still don't know who's watching. I just know the subscription never actually ended." The job listing said seeking reliable individual, no family ties preferred, 6-month contract, $340,000, full isolation. I should have stopped reading right there at no family ties preferred. Instead, I circled the number twice and called that same afternoon, before I could talk myself out of it. Halloway Island sits 11 miles off the Washington coast, owned by a shell company that, as far as public records show, owns nothing else in the world. My job was simple, or so I was told during the 2-hour orientation call. Maintain the buildings, run the generators on schedule, log the weather every morning at 6, and never, under any circumstance, no matter what I heard or saw, enter the lower storage facility beneath the old lighthouse. I was told I was the 7th caretaker to hold the position. I found out by accident, 3 weeks in, standing in a supply closet where 6 previous logbooks sat stacked behind a mop bucket, like nobody had ever meant for me to find them, or like nobody who came before me had cared enough to hide them properly. The first 5 months were almost peaceful, in a way that should have made me more suspicious than it did. Routine, solitude, the ocean doing what oceans do at every hour of the day. I started talking to myself just to hear a voice. I started narrating my own chores out loud, like this recording, except back then it felt like company instead of evidence. Then the supply started disappearing. Not stolen exactly, worse than that. Recorded as delivered, signed for in my own handwriting in the ledger, for shipments I never actually received, and boxes I never personally opened. I checked the log 3 separate times, held the page up to the light like it might reveal a forgery underneath. It wasn't a forgery. It was my signature, my handwriting, down to the way I cross my 7s. I don't sleepwalk. I've never sleepwalked in my life. Not once. Not as a child. Not under stress. Not ever. I started listening more carefully at night, the way you do when your own house stops feeling like it belongs to you. There was a sound coming from beneath the lighthouse, rhythmic, mechanical, running on a cycle I couldn't place no matter how long I timed it. Twice a week, always sometime after midnight, a boat I never actually saw arrive would leave from the island's north dock and be gone by morning, its wake still visible on the water in the gray dawn light, spreading out like a wound that hadn't finished closing yet. I found the 6th caretaker's final logbook entry on a night I couldn't sleep anyway, dated 14 months before I ever set foot on this island. It read, "I think the logs write themselves when I'm not looking. I think I'm not the only one keeping this place running. I don't think we're allowed to compare notes with each other, because comparing notes would show the pattern too clearly. I'm going to go look at the lower facility tonight, whatever the contract says. If someone reads this after me, don't do what I'm about to do." I went anyway. I told myself I had a right to know what I was maintaining. The lower facility wasn't storage, not in any sense the word usually means. It was refrigerated floor to ceiling, humming with an industrial cooling system engineered to handle a scale of preservation I had no context to understand. Standing there alone with my flashlight shaking hard enough to rattle the beam across the walls. And I finally understood, standing in that cold, exactly why the job listing wanted someone with no family ties, why the pay was so obscene it should have been the first warning sign instead of the reason I called, why 6 caretakers before me had never resurfaced in any life I could trace afterward, no matter how many names I tried, and why, weeks later, when I finally tried the radio out of pure desperation, it returned only static on every single frequency I'd trusted for 5 straight months. This island was never a research station, and it was never a retreat. It's a disposal contract, a private, off-book solution for people whose deaths need to happen somewhere with no jurisdiction, no witnesses, and no chain of custody attached to any of it, funneled quietly through a shell company that pays desperate, disconnected people obscene amounts of money to keep the machinery running underneath them, and ask absolutely no questions about what the machinery is for. And standing there, I finally understood what actually happened to the last 6 caretakers once their 6-month contracts came to an end. Their contracts don't end. They become part of what the island maintains. I'm recording this final entry because the boat that never arrives is due again at midnight, right on schedule. And for the first time in 6 months, I just heard 2 sets of footsteps on the dock outside instead of 1.